There's a new program that's been added called Automatic Boundary Intersection Adjustment, and it goes into effect whenever you attempt to create a surface and a mismatch error occurs. You'll recall in the past that whenever you got this mismatch error, PDGS flagged where it occurred, how much it was, and you were allowed to make the decision whether or not you wanted to continue with surface construction. To illustrate what it used to do in the past, let me use this diagram where these are my two primary boundary lines and these are my secondaries. What used to happen in the past is if you had a mismatch between a primary and secondary, let's say over in this area, well, the surface that was built, the boundary actually held that shape pretty well up until the end where this point was adjusted to actually touch the primary boundary line. So what you wound up with was something that looked like this. Just a badly shaped boundary, actually. Now keep in mind that we've never changed the original boundary line. We're talking about surface boundaries here built based off the shape of the lines that we're using to construct these surfaces. Well, what happens now with automatic boundary adjustment, the surface construction method is much more sophisticated. For example, using the same diagram, say these are my two primary boundary lines, and let's say we have a mismatch on both ends of my secondary. What will happen is the boundary will be adjusted off the secondary boundary line towards the primaries, much like a reorient, until an intersection is found, let's say over here. When that intersection is found, the boundary is rocked about that pivot point until it finds the other possible intersection, which is the only thing it would do if you had only one mismatch on one side. So what you'll wind up with is a much better, smoother boundary than what we had previously. Now, if there still is a bit of a mismatch, that boundary will be rescaled off the original line to make an intersection with the primary boundary lines. Remember, the primary boundaries are not affected. It's only the secondary boundaries. But there is something that you want to keep in mind whenever you're doing this, and that is with whatever tolerance that you select to build your surface within, if your mismatch value is within that tolerance, this boundary line will be projected along the directions of the primary boundaries at a normal direction. Now, if you go in and you build a surface and you get a mismatch that's greater than the tolerance selected, you'll get the same menu that you've had before with your mismatch error. If it's possible, you can continue on. What your mismatch value is and the tolerance that you've set, the largest value that is, and any mismatch error that's larger than the tolerance you've set, well, that boundary will be projected along the missing axis. So it's very important to keep that in mind. If you can anticipate this happening when this menu pops up, you want to make sure, if you want to continue on, that all your boundary lines are as planar to the screen as possible. The idea being, if you're working with a mismatch that's larger than your tolerance that you've set, you're going to get a much better definition, much closer to the original design intent that you wanted by projecting along the missing axis. The normal projection is used for surfaces that are constructed in rotated views. So you have to keep in mind that this new function is there to give you better surface definition if and when these mismatch errors occur, but it's not intended to take away the responsibility of the designers in having good, smooth lines and true intersections.